Welcome back to A Better Conversation, a podcast put on by A Better Dallas. As always, I'm your host, Chris Clement, joined today by the man, the myth, the mustache, and the beard,
Yes.
Mr. Kyle Mason.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about our guest today. We're going to get into immigration, border policy, and all the hot topics in the news right now.
Right, and that's really probably why you're here, because of the special guests we have here today. We have a couple of gentlemen from the Immigration Accountability Project. We have Mr. Chmielenski and we have Mr. Grant Newman. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So before we get started, for those of you that don't know, I want to give you an opportunity to talk to our audience, talk to our viewers about what the Immigration Accountability Project is, because I had an opportunity to meet both of you gentlemen recently when you were here in Texas. I know y'all have been on a bus tour around the country, and you're all over the place trying to do the Lord's work as far as immigration. So would you mind telling our audience a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So Immigration Accountability advocates for an America First immigration policy, and that simply means a secure border, ending illegal immigration, protecting jobs and wages for American workers, and also reducing our current record level legal immigration levels that we've experienced. And we do that in a number of different ways, by educating voters on the issues. And we use alternative media podcasts like yours to try to get the word out. And we also, on our website, we collect every single action that's been taken by members of Congress to provide a full record. That's where the accountability part of the Immigration Accountability Project comes in from. So it's a great resource that's on our website, iaproject.org. Not only do we follow all members of Congress, we also track all of the immigration legislation, and we also track every single executive action that's been taken by the Trump administration on the issue of immigration. And then lastly, and this is something that Grant's very involved in, is really educating the decision makers in Washington, D.C. on the issue, keeping them informed. Our team is the team of experts. So people come to us, use us as a resource in Washington, D.C., and we're happy to advocate again with them what we believe would be an America First immigration policy.
Thank you. And I really would encourage our audience to go check out the website, iaproject.org. There are a ton of great resources there. If you ask yourself how you can be better informed about some of these issues, I know for a lot of voters, a lot of people, it's hard to mesh what happens on the campaign trail with what actually ends up happening in the State House or on Capitol Hill. I think y'all's website does an excellent job of sort of bridging that gap to inform people. Again, it's iaproject.org. Also, importantly, you can do a little fundraising. People can donate to your organization because, again, I believe you're a nonprofit, and sort of your generosity of viewers like you is part of how you guys are able to do your work. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, we do have a big red giant donate button on the top right hand corner of our website. We are a 501c3, so any donations are tax deductible as well. An extra bonus.
Perfect. Yeah, we all want lower taxes. Well, I want to dive in. Meaty issues. Talk to Grant. He's been described as sort of the policy wonk or whatever the current terminology is. If I don't know if wonk is still what's said. I know that was the terminology a decade ago, but I want to dive in to talk about the H1 visas. First, if you could, and I obviously, when we were in pre-production, even now, I don't know, H1B, H1, whatever. Would you mind start off by helping us with what the terminology and what this stuff does?
Yeah, there's basically a letter there's almost every letter that has some kind of visa attached to it. And in this case, H1Bs are non-immigrant visas. So they're not visas they're intended for someone who's coming to stay and live here forever. They're just people who are coming to do a temporary job, a specialty occupation job. And they get pitched as the jobs of the best and the brightest, the smart people that are in high tech and all these other things. The reality is, like most guest worker visas we have, it's become a race to the bottom. Instead of, accelerating, making sure that we're bringing in people that are getting tons of money, it's become a way to bring in people at entry-level wages at $60,000 a year to do kind of basic jobs. And it allows companies to not hire Americans It allows companies to get rid of people that they've gotten raises, over decades. It's become an easy way to save a buck. I know I took a law class on an immigration law class, and there was a whole section on, here's how you use the system. Here's how you use it to get the workers you want at the cost you want. So, I mean, that's the system as it stands now. A lot of what we do and what we've been focused on with several bills in Congress, Senator Banks introduced one just last week, is trying to turn that visa on its head, to turn it into what it was intended to be to begin with, which is, it's a race to the top. If Google and Meta and all these different companies really want to pay a lot of money to get someone that's truly an exceptional worker in, they can do it. They can be at the front of the line to do this. But we're going to cut off that lower level that's being used to replace students that are fresh out of college. We have STEM graduation. Our STEM grads are barely working in STEM. And we need to turn that around and be relying on our own students to produce our own things, these kind of guest worker visas. That's kind of a rough outline of H1B.
Kyle, I know you're chomping at the bit. Kyle is our immigration policy should fully employ Americans first. Very big passion moment. Like I to say that Kyle has been salivating for having y'all on and being able to talk about this is an understatement. So
it all started with a chicken farm being raided, and then it just has kind of gone from there. So
wait, can I show our? I mean, Kyle's got notes. Like Kyle is ready to talk about this stuff.
So is this the chicken raid in Trump 45 you're talking about?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
All about it.
And then obviously there's also the meatpacking facility in Kansas, maybe Nebraska. But so I love to use Chat GPT, right? And man, I tell you what, me trying to compile these questions and throw together the charts and everything was very difficult, and it was giving me a really hard time. I started kind of having a little conspiracy in my head that ChatGPT is being facilitated by people putting this together that are on H1B visas, so this data was kind of hard to put together. Have you had that problem as well?
I have had that problem.
Yeah.
And I've had the same thoughts as you.
So I guess my first question is, I can't seem to find an exact number of how many H1B visas exactly are out at any one time. Is there a reason for that is easily explainable?
There is a reason. I don't want you to know that. Well, that's the main thing. There are a lot of reasons behind it. I can give you the big picture is that our government does not have a great grasp on the amount of people that are here at any given point in time. They're relying on paper documents a lot of the time. During COVID, a lot of immigration processing stopped because a vault containing naturalization papers in some, and it's just an old mine was shut down during COVID and they couldn't access it. So they just had to stop. We don't have the paper. It takes them a month to figure out a number for how many people were arrested at the border at the previous month. It takes them that long. It can take a year for them to compile all the visa data and actually release it. So that's a big problem. The other problem is that under immigration law, our caps are never actual caps. And so we say that the cap for H-1Bs is 65,000, but then there's an additional 20,000 that are exempt from the cap. And then there are additional exemptions that don't count against the cap at all. And then each H-1B could be 3 years. They could renew it for up to 6. They could apply for a green card and then continually get re-upped year after year after year after year after year, not counted against the cap. And so the number is immense. It's huge. It's well over the 85,000. It's in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and so with that, I asked for a range of conservative scenario, medium scenario, and high scenario, and like you said, there's tons of visas here, but just in the employment non-immigration, it says, the median is roughly 3 million, but it could go up to 4 and then down to 2. But it seems like when somebody, like you had just mentioned, somebody gets an H-1B visa, now it kind of opens up the door for their family members to get visas. Like you said, they apply for the green card and now they're not being put against so this number is just kind of a rolling number that grows exponentially every single year.
Yes.
I think this kind of came to light for me anyway, was we had that 18-wheeler accident in Florida where it was an immigrant from India got a driver's license, which then they rolled into a CDL and was driving in Florida. And, it was a horrible crash, right? Well, then it comes to find out the people in that van were also immigrants on H1B visas. And so now it's like, okay, these people are everywhere. They're running into each other on the roads. And it's like, okay, well, how many? And then Rubio comes out, well, there's 55 million visas that we're going to really look into. And it's like, did you just say 55 million?
And part of the reason for that number was huge, is because when you give someone a visa, it could be like a tourist visa. It's technically valid for 10 years, but you can only come in for short periods. And so you can come in, you can go back, you can come in, go back. So a lot of these people weren't actually here. But the point is, there's a lot of them that are just hanging out there. We don't issue them for short periods. We get these massive windows. But I mean, the H1B program, there's an entire program that was created without authorization of Congress called OPT, Optional Practical Training. It was a way to bridge the gap between a foreign student, and an H1B. And they literally invented this fake status where students can stay 3 years after they've completed their study.
Yeah.
They can work while they wait to get an H1B. And while they're working, their employers don't have to pay FICA taxes. It's an F student. And so there is a pretty significant discount for the OPT. And this is not authorized by Congress. And at this point, it is, if not the biggest guest worker program we have, it's really close to our unlimited agricultural visa program. It's right on the edge of it. And I mean, this is the kind of thing we deal with.
What are the numbers? I mean, what are the numbers on? You talk about being the largest program. Like, how many people are we talking about?
Well, it depends on when you ask ICE. This is sort of gets back to how many people are actually in the program. Sometimes ICE will say about 250,000. And ICE is actually in charge of this program. It's a weird setup that they are in charge of the student visa program, and sometimes it's 100,000 higher than that. And they'll give two different numbers at the same time, and you have to kind of guess between the two. If it's in the 300,000 range, that means it's right around our ag visas. We're giving out, 310,000, I believe, H2A agricultural temporary visas last year alone. That's up from 75,000 or so when I first started doing immigration policy. It's just grown exponentially.
And is that like college freshman year, they're going to give out 300,000 and that's good for 4 years? Or is it like you're a sophomore, you have to reapply? If you don't get it, you only did 1 year at the university, you have to leave.
Well, this is post completion. These are people that are done. They come in on a student visa to study and leave. And they're being allowed to stay after they graduate just to work for fun.
Yeah.
And if you get an OPT, then you get an H1B. And if you sit on an H1B long enough, you can get that converted into a green card. And if you don't have a green card available to you because your country is oversubscribed, like India primarily or China, then you basically just sit in that H1B forever. That's the pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that you just mentioned that I don't think a lot of people understand is your country being oversubscribed. From that, I would deduce that there are limits essentially per country. How is that determined, and I guess measured, since we have a hard time figuring out how many people are here?
They're per country caps. And so one of the things we're good at knowing is how many people have applied for a green card. Now, we give out 1.1 million green cards, permanent residents, every single year. I mean, consistently. I think we even got that number during COVID. When immigration was technically done, and half of these people are actually coming into the country and getting a green card that way, and half of these people are here already under some other status, and they're adjusting status. But we have a limit on employment-based and family-based immigration. I think it's 7% per country. So the whole point of that was one country can't come in and monopolize all the visas. And so what's happened is that India has, especially because of the H1B to green card pipeline, we gave them this little gray area where they can stay in status while they early file for a green card that's not available for them. And so they just kind of hover in this space. And so every month, there's a visa bulletin update that goes up that shows if you filed by this date, and it's whatever date's on there, now you're eligible for your green card. And some of these countries go way, 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 way back, depending on what category your country's oversubscribed with. Now, there have been efforts in Congress by a couple members here and there that say, well, this isn't fair. We want to do first come, first serve. We're just going to knock this out. And usually what happens is that every other country in the world realizes that India and China are going to take every green card for the next 10 to 15 years, and they get upset. There's a whole mess, and we just kind of end up right back at this. So there have been good proposals to fix this, just wiping out the backlog, wiping out our employment-based system, and redoing it based on merit.
Hey, did you know a Better Conversations on social media? You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Following us will not only keep you up to date on our latest podcast drops, but will also keep you informed on current events around DFW, including election news, volunteer opportunities, and social events like late cleanups on Saturday mornings or our happy hours throughout the month where you can meet like-minded people in a fun social setting. You can also meet local politicians and activists that are our guest speakers. Follow the links below to connect.
But it still hasn't begun.
I guess that would be my question. We talked about the H1Bs. Is there a way for that type of visa or that system to work properly, or is it just something that just needs to be eliminated entirely?
I think it's possible to make it work as intended, but there are a lot of changes. One of those is we could turn it back into what it was intended to be, which is a non-immigrant guest worker program. You come to work for a short period of time, and then you return home. And if you want to apply for a green card for an employment-based category, you should do that from your home. You can't just stay here and work. We can retool the program so that it actually prioritizes the highest wages, which is great. Then it's easier for American workers to compete at those higher levels. It's harder when it's entry level. Those are two great examples.
We'll just to add some context to that. There's a few 100,000 H1B applications that come in every single year, and as Grant was saying, there's only 65,000 available, plus the extra 20,000 for advanced degrees. Instead of giving them out in order of highest wage to lowest wage, it's a lottery. So they just randomly select which ones. So a lot of employers will lowball the salary, just hoping that they win the H1B lottery. You get a worker for cheap.
Wow. Okay.
That right there is, I think, one of my biggest concerns, is that the low salary kind of indicates an entry level type job. So we tell all our kids and, parents listening to this, they're paying for their children to go to school to get a STEM degree, right? That's what we told them to do. But now they're trying to go out into the workforce and kind of, build that resume and cut their teeth at these companies, but there's no room for them, right? Because all the entry level jobs are being filled. And every year this ticks by, Americans are becoming less and less fluent in these fields because there's nowhere for them to actually get any experience. Here I have annual tech job openings projected for the next 10 years, going to be about 315,000 a year. Graduating in computer science, roughly 115,000. But the H1B visa petitions filed is over 400,000. And so if there was no H1B visas, America would be short, right, of the workforce. But with the H1B visas, it's completely flooded. So it's completely imbalanced. It really seems completely imbalanced. And do you think that, as far as the bottom line goes for these big companies, is that what this thing has really devolved into? Like you said, it's just a race to the bottom, cheap labor, 16-hour days, and these people are happy to do it.
And that's conservative too.
And if they aren't happy to do it, they lose their job, they have to go home.
Yeah.
Right.
American workers don't have to do that. So you have a little bit of an extra. And it's at the low end with students, but it's at the upper end too. There was a big case involving Disney workers a few years ago that even Democrats were upset about, which is something to see. That involved older guys who'd been working at Disney for years, and they brought in an H-1B, and they said, here's the deal. Because the law says we can't replace you within 90 days of this guy starting, here's what's going to happen. He's going to sit at your desk for 90 days. He's going to watch every single thing that you do. And at the end of the 90 days, you're gone.
Yeah.
And so this guy who built, he earned raises and stuff, he's being replaced by a guy who's being paid for the experience that he has, which is fresh out of college, young guy from India. And so they could pay him, $60,000 and tell this guy to go away and hope he signs an NDA. It's terrible. And all of that puts more pressure. Like, we're trying to get our students to study STEM. But at the same time, we're creating a market that doesn't actually pay them for it. Wages have been flat for over a decade. If you control for inflation, they're flat.
Right.
We had tons of STEM grads, and none of them are working at STEM. They're working at Starbucks. And you're not going to get ahead of any kind of shortages in education if we are using labor, unlimited supply of cheap labor to drive them down.
So from the IAP, from the Immigration Accountability Project perspective, what is the path forward? If our audience is sitting out there and they're being frustrated by this and they want to do something, or they want to know what policies should be in place or who they need to call, like what would be the action steps you would want to see from the general public on this?
Well, I think the Trump executive order from Friday is a step in the right direction. And what this did was this raised the application fee for H1Bs to 100,000. So now, if a tech company really, really wants a foreign worker because, as they claim, they can't find an American worker to fill the job, well, they're going to have to pay for it now. It's going to cost them $100,000. It's not going to be just for the application. Forget about the salary that they're going to have to pay them afterwards. So no longer is it just access to cheap labor. So that's one way that you can do it. Again, another thing that Grant had mentioned was to change the way that H-1B visas are awarded. Instead of awarding them through this lottery system, awarding them by highest salary to lowest salary. We focus so often on the T&E part of STEM, technology and engineering, on it. But there's also that mathematics element. There's accountants. I mean, just run-of-the-mill accountants and bookkeepers that are getting H-1B visas for some of these companies. You can't tell me that that's not a job an American won't do. Yeah. So it absolutely is. So I think those are two of the biggest things. Grant's probably got a few others that he can add to that, but by increasing this application fee and changing the way that they're issued to ensure that these lower wage jobs aren't getting a bulk of the H-1B visas, and instead they're going to the higher paid, which at least you could then say, okay, maybe they're the best and the brightest, that they are making 125,000 plus.
There are different paths too. So the executive branch path is one of them. The administration could do lots of things to get ahead of this. They could end OPT. OPT was created by memo.
Right.
They can issue regulations that help. There was a regulation issued this morning about how they award the H-1Bs in the lottery. It's a little convoluted, but it sort of stacks the decks more towards, your higher paying instead of your lower paying. It's not based on real wage. It's kind of a complicated mathematical thing, but that's something that can be done. Getting in touch with a member of Congress is one of the biggest. Republicans and Democrats historically have recognized this problem, specifically with H-1Bs. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few places that there is some agreement. There's a bipartisan bill every year to do it.
Yes.
But you've got to get in touch with the members and say, hey, do something about this. We're sick and tired of waiting. Now, there's another fun thing that's going on. If you're on X, you should tap into the H-1B world there, because you've got a lot of these guys that worked in tech that have experienced this, and recognize that one of those steps in the process is the perm process, where your employer has to put out a public notice that there's a job available if he wants to sponsor you for a green card.
Yes.
And usually what employers do is find a way to run those ads so that no one sees them. And if someone does see them and responds to it, that means an American worker is interested and you can't hire this H-1B. So you take the ad back in, you redo it, it's a whole process. And so what these guys have done on X is track down all of these ads and put them on the web. And now people on X, these like people that are unemployed or working in IT, are applying for all of these jobs.
Love it.
That's fantastic.
They're slowing it down and they're getting responses like, hi, thank you for your interest. Also, how did you find this ad? Things like that. This ad that I was legally required to find to look for American workers. So, I mean, we're in an interesting time for this. If that could happen in other guest worker categories, I'd be thrilled too.
Because it's not like they post this on LinkedIn. It's in a very obscure small town. Like, they go out of their way to make it inside of a newspaper that nobody reads or something like that.
Like your grocery store and out newspaper.
Yes.
We've had people send us ads and ask us what to do about them, because they would say, they were job postings that said for H-1Bs. It's like your requirement of your job is, it's like, that's illegal. Here's how you direct it to DOL and have them, deal deal with the situation.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, what is the legal ramifications? I mean, the Department of Justice is not on this, or is there just not the appetite for it just because these really like Fortune 50 companies, I mean, they're the ones making all the donations. Is that, there's something there to that?
There have been several guest worker related lawsuits across the board, H1B, H2B, H2A, all of these that require these kind of labor, they have like specific labor rules. They happen there, but they're few and far between. When they do happen, it's pretty big news. And I think no employer wants to be in that situation, so they have to at least be a little bit careful. But from what I've heard, some of these perm application employers, they're nervous because they're getting a lot of applications and they're just pulling the employment sponsorships together. So, that's the system.
Well, I want to talk about moving on a little bit from the H1Bs to something that, I think Grant's a big fan of, maybe the Trump Gold Card experience. I think recently there were some changes to the Trump Gold Card, however he was selling it. I think a lot of people have heard about it, buy your way to permanent resident status or citizenship or whatever it is. Would y'all mind unpacking that a little bit and then talking about how it's recently changed?
I will say, as a general rule, IAP is a fan of selling citizenship. It's not a great thing. Not a great way to determine who's going to fit into the country. We kind of do that already with the EB-5 program, and it is just one of the most notoriously fraud-ridden immigration programs, which is saying something. And there have been many reports from the OIG to confirm that EB-5 is a problem. We've had cases of fraud with a guy named Mayorkas back when he was the USCIS director for selling, or basically packing the system for his friends. So the original Gold Card announcement, it sounded like it was $5 million to buy citizenship to come to the U.S. It has since been turned into an executive order, and it's not anything like that. Instead, it's basically for $1 million, you can show evidence for an EB-1, an employment-based green card under the existing caps. Your employer can sponsor you for $2 million, and you basically have access to EB-1 and EB-2A and 2B. These are employment-based green cards. They're under a cap. They exist already. Seems like it's pretty much fine. I don't know why an employer would choose that over using the EB-5 program, which is cheaper, but it's a new option that exists by executive order.
I mean, is there a cool gold card for the EB-5 program?
They tell me there's a card. Maybe we'll advance to a platinum card.
I always thought when he said $5 million, I just thought that was really cheap. I think it's worth so much more to be an American. I agree. If you have $5 million, I mean, we know who's going to be buying these things. I mean, 25 million. Yeah. Like, just come on, you got to bump those numbers up, right? And I feel like if they would have followed through, they would have sold just as many. So,
and also, you figure it would be so much easier to use one of the other visa programs that are almost free. And again, 1.1 million a year. You're going to be able to find a way to self-sponsor and come in for free as is. But it's I guess another path. We'll see. I don't know if anyone's going to take them up on it. Secretary Lutnick said that he's got a ton of interest, so we'll see.
I traveled to Australia years ago, and they were explaining to me that they had, one of the reasons that real estate prices in Sydney were so astronomical is because they had some sort of buy your way into citizenship or buy your way into residency status down there. And they would just have these, Chinese business owners desperate to get their money out of China and somewhere else would just massively overpay for real estate so they could make that investment. Do we have something like that here? Or is that what the gold card? And when I first heard about it, that was the first thing that I thought of.
It sounds more like, that is a way a gold card could be abused, which is a big concern. That's what happens in EB-5. People invest, and you basically invest in properties. You use that to get your green card. It's solar industry. That's a lot of what it's tied to. So yeah, that exists here.
Got it. Interesting. Any Chris, any thoughts on the gold card? Are we? I assume the comments for Grant is organizationally IAP is out on the gold cards.
We're out on the gold cards, yeah. But I guess we're happy that it's not increasing legal immigration levels, so they're going to pull from existing green cards. So I guess that makes the program somewhat less worse, but I'm in full agreement with you that the United States should not be in the business of selling U.S. citizenship. It's too precious. It's too valuable around the world. One of the most valuable passports you can have. So why would we sell it for $1 million?
Well, and that's where, we talk about some of the Trump phenomenon overall is very big announcements.
Yeah.
And then what the actual workable policy ends up being later is a little bit different than what was initially advertised. Kind of related to that, one of the things that we talked about in pre-production is the Secure the Border Act. And I know that's something that you all support, or at least I believe that you all support. Would you mind talking a little bit about what that bill is, kind of where it is in the process?
Sure. Well, with the fact that one of the things that the Trump administration has been successful with, one of the things that he said was going to be big and bold and actually came through on this was securing the border. What we have seen happen along the southern border, the southwest border, especially right there in Texas, between just what we were seeing there a year ago is truly amazing what this administration has been able to manage to do in just 6 short months. So we've gone from record high illegal border crossings 18 months ago to, virtually nobody coming across the border illegally. So it's phenomenal what they've done. The problem is that the Trump administration has relied heavily on executive actions to get it done. It's all authorized under the existing code, so it's all stuff that can be done and could have been done by previous administrations, but it's not. Unfortunately, it's not required necessarily for them to do some of the things that they're doing. So that's what this legislation, Secure the Border Act, would do. In the previous Congress, it was HR 2. It was the reason why it was HR 2. The first 10 bill numbers, Grant, is it? In each Congress are reserved by the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader to be their top priorities. So HR 2 was their second biggest priority in the previous Congress. Of course, it was during the height of the Biden border crisis. And essentially what it did was took all of these actions that would secure the border. It would heavily limit asylum abuse, raise the credible fear standard, which is sort of the first step into receiving asylum status. It would reduce parole abuse, deal with the issue that we have with unaccompanied alien children that come across the border illegally, and there's 8 million other issues that it would deal with that Grant can talk more specifically about. So it did pass through the House of Representatives. Of course, it never came to a formal vote in the Senate, since the Senate was under Chuck Schumer's control. It did come up as an amendment to some must-pass legislation, but of course it was defeated in the Senate along party lines. Now we're just waiting for it to be introduced in the more recent Congress, the 119th Congress, which started back in January. And we really need this. And this is something that I feel that some of our elected officials feel like, well, we don't need to do anything. We just look at what the Trump administration has accomplished along the border. But no, we do. Because if we don't codify what the Trump administration has done, then the next administration that wants to act like the Biden administration can, and then we're back dealing with 100,000, 200,000 illegal border crossings every single month. Grant can talk more specifically about where the bill is in the process of getting introduced, and what its prospects might be over the next 18 months, the remaining 18 months of the 118th Congress.
I've been very clear with House leadership that they have to make it HR 2 again, because having us memorize a different number for HR 2. It's the lingo is easy. HR 1 was the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Right. Now we're just waiting on HR 2. It seems like the process right now we're in is they're introducing smaller bits and pieces of it like they did in last Congress, and at the end they'll combine them together in the Judiciary Committee and then send them on. But Chris has highlighted sort of the most important difference between what the Big Beautiful Act was doing and what HR 2 does. And that is the Big Beautiful Bill was about funding what we're doing now. That's just this window of 4 years. That's funding all of the awesome stuff the Trump administration is able to do. But yeah, it ends. Those policy loopholes are not fixed. The executive actions can be undone by Congress in an appropriations process. They can be changed at any point in time. Or just if Trump leaves, those policies can go away forever. Right. And that bill was all about patching the loopholes so the next administration can't do it. Now, there is a piece of that is the unaccompanied alien children Chris mentioned. That is a massive problem that still exists that can't be addressed executively necessarily. The other loopholes can. You can stop giving out parole to millions of people illegally every year. You can stop, basically like waving people in through an app with another illegal parole program. You stop doing all those things. But there's still binding issues with how we address unaccompanied alien children under the Trafficking Victims Law. There are loopholes there that basically baited cartels into using children for profit. So a loophole in Trafficking Victims Prevention Act is actually causing trafficking. I forget the judge in Texas who brought this up during the Obama administration, but he said, you've got cartels delivering people to the border. DHS is picking them up, delivering the kids to their illegal alien parents in, Virginia for a discounted rate. Well, we're completing smuggling for them. And why? Because of this bill, the problems in this bill. Yeah. Congress, a couple weeks ago, tried to reauthorize that trafficking bill on suspension just to get it through the House and with no issues. And it was IAP that said, you can't do this. If you're going to reauthorize the trafficking bill, you've got to fix these loopholes to stop the trafficking. And so we're looking at how to do that too. And if that's taking that provision from HR 2 and putting in that trafficking bill, that's one path. But the key is we've got to be forward thinking. And hopefully the White House agrees that patching these loopholes is critical for maintaining this security that we have so we don't end up in this, pendulum swing nightmare in 3 years.
Not to go in too much in the weeds, but you keep talking about the loopholes. What are the loopholes that are allowing for this human trafficking to occur?
If there's asylum loopholes, there are things that I don't know if you remember the Remain in Mexico program, MPP. That's a great example. That's something that's in the law, where instead of just basically taking people and either detaining them or releasing them into the interior while they wait for their asylum claim and then never seen again. Yeah. You actually make them wait in Mexico. It's a deterrent for people who are fraudulently applying. And also, it's a way to keep people from just being released. That's in the law already. They have the permission to do that. But what HR 2 would do is mandate that. The bottom line is that when someone shows up at the border illegally under HR 2, you have 3 options only. Detain, return, or remove. That's it. No other option. So, people can apply through the lawful means, but basically that's what you're limited to. No release, no parole abuse, no unaccompanied alien children abuse. And they had additional things like wall funding, but the Big Beautiful Bill Act has taken care of that. Getting rid of the CDP-1 app parole program has been turned into CDP Home. Yeah. Now people can use that to facilitate their trip home, which is great. It had a lot of that stuff in it, but it's all about those kind of key 3 elements, and all the different parts of HR 2 kind of worked in that way. One piece of it made its way into the Laken Riley Act. It was kind of right at the beginning of this Congress. There was a bill named after a victim of illegal immigration, Laken Riley, that there was a provision addressing specifically her issue, but then there was another provision that said, if an administration in the future violates the law in regards to parole, if they're giving mass parole, or they're releasing people that are required to be detained, state attorneys general have an express route, they have instant standing, an express route to get that enjoined. So it was kind of snuck in that bill. It's a provision from HR 2, but it's the Ken Paxton provision, right? Yeah. Attorney General Paxton was key in stopping a lot of these things, but he couldn't fully get it done because we were stuck in the standing issue. We were stuck, going through this entire process. And so this was a way to kind of address that a little bit in the future. Hopefully it gives us kind of a backstop. But fortunately, that is in the law right now. So we've got that going for us.
So I'm going to do something dangerous and try to apply logic to politics. Yeah. So in the last Congress, if HR 2 made it through the House and was defeated on party lines in the Senate, And now those party lines have changed in the Senate. What's the obstacle to getting it through now?
There are two obstacles. One is the context has changed. So in the House, we only had 2 votes against HR2, and both of those votes were because they were opposed to mandatory E-Verify, which was actually in the bill as a great provision. One of those members of Congress lost his seat. The other is still there, and so there technically is a bigger buffer there. But what we also have are a lot of members of Congress on the Republican side who are already terrified of mass deportations. They are terrified of what they're seeing. They're panicking. They're worried about the people complaining that they can't find their cheap labor anymore and that they don't know how to use the unlimited agricultural visa program. And so they're already talking about and proposing mass amnesty for effectively everyone here. And so in the context of the Trump administration as opposed to Biden, there may be some Republican issues. Now, I think that those members of Congress should be forced to vote against this.
Mm-hmm.
If that's really their position. They shouldn't be allowed to hide. But in the Senate, the problem we have is a 60-vote threshold. So it's still going to require 60 votes to get a cloture in the Senate. So the numbers are better. In fact, I think the Senate's better on immigration than I've ever seen in my career. Definitely, I'm guessing you agree, Chris. But are there enough Democrat senators willing to cross the aisle and secure the border? I'd say probably not. They could do that if they move the bill independently, or they could attach it to a must-pass piece of legislation like a continuing resolution, an appropriations bill, something that has to get through, and then that would put pressure on the Senate to vote for it. But as it stands now, that 60-vote threshold is the holdup.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
That's never going to happen. I don't see Democratic senators stepping up for that. You mentioned the.
It's interesting. I've been working on the immigration issue for 18 years, and if I went back 18 years ago, I would say no. I mean, my second year working on this issue, the DREAM Act came to the floor, and it was defeated because enough Democrats voted against it. Joined all the Republicans that voted against it. So, it is. I don't disagree with you. It's a tough hill to climb to try to get 60 votes in the Senate right now with a current philosophy and makeup of the Democratic Party, especially the caucus of Democrats in the Senate. But it just goes to show you how much this issue has changed in the last 2 decades. That some of the best members of Congress 20 years ago were Democrats on this particular issue.
Yeah,
and they need to.
And now
they want to take that hard
to be found.
vote. They should have to take that hard vote over and over again.
Yeah,
it's happening with the continuing resolution right now. The Senate's just going to make the Democrats vote down the funding for the government. They're going to just keep doing it. That's how you apply pressure. But yeah, must-pass legislation is key. Attaching this to something that the Democrats want so bad that they just have to let it go is part of that exercise.
Well, that's part of, I mean, I guess the question I have is with midterms coming up, I mean, do we have, I guess, vulnerable Democrats that could be pressured with the prospect of having re-election? I mean, do we have enough of those that are actually on the ballot this next cycle to do that?
I think we do.
Yeah, and you saw the Laban Riley Act come across the finish line with 60 votes in the Senate. So that's a classic example. So the question would then become, if not attached to a must-pass vehicle, if HR2 just came to the Senate floor on its own, would it be considered too far for some of those more moderate Democrats that are in those swing states and are concerned about their election chances in 26 and 28?
It'd be interesting to see if any House Democrats moved over too. They didn't last time.
And Grant alluded to this a little bit, but the whole optics of, unfortunately, the issue have changed. I mean, we can celebrate everything that Trump has done on the border, but no longer are you seeing all across social media, occasionally on the news, what's happening down there.
Right.
That's gone. The optics of mass chaos at the southern border are gone.
No.
People sleeping on the streets in El Paso because there's nowhere else for them to go, and they're waiting for buses to take them somewhere into the interior of the country. Those optics are gone, unfortunately, and that did help energize Republicans and some of those moderate Democrats to try to do something.
One of the things that you also talked about that I want to circle back just a little bit on, gosh, every time I say circle back, it makes me think of Jen Psaki, and I get disappointed in myself for the lazy rhetorical device. Is there a problem within the Republican Party, and we'll say the Chamber of Commerce Republicans, I think is what they used to be called, with the addiction to cheap labor that pours cold water on some of this as well?
Yeah. And Grant can talk about the Dignity Act, which is the mass amnesty bill that he's alluded to a little bit. That would be that group of Republicans that you're referring to. But you just saw some of the pushback that happened after a few of these farms and meatpacking plants were raided by ICE earlier on in the Trump administration. You started to see Republicans freaking out because all of a sudden donors in their districts were being affected by the Trump
Right.
administration.
Well, anybody that's watched this podcast knows that Kyle has a lifelong dream to work in a meat processing plant, specifically chickens. And so for him to see illegal immigrants taking that job from him is really a dream deferred.
I wouldn't mind being a butcher. And it was like, hey, ICE raids a meatpacking factory, and the next day the lobby is full of Americans looking for a job, and it's like, hey, there's 5 meat packers in America, and it's like, hey, instead of paying $25 an hour, you're gonna have to pay $35 an hour. And of course, CNBC wants to spin that as a bad thing, and they'll say that's inflationary. Well, wages are also rising, and that's kind of the story now. As we have this immigration conversation and the H1B visa, you're going to start seeing that's inflationary. That's going to be bad for the economy. Powell had kind of, for the first time, maybe took a shot across the bow at that in his last speech, saying that the economy is slowing down because immigration is slowing down. I'm not an economist. Okay, I'm a very simple man, but just bringing in everyone from around the world and saying that it's growth is not the kind of growth that I want. I don't think Americans want either, what Republican or Democrat. Like you said earlier, this brings Bernie Sanders is on the side of getting rid of H1B visas. And before 2016, he wanted to build a wall, right? That was a Koch brothers conspiracy, but he doesn't say that anymore. So the whole thing is just, this is a really big opportunity for some bipartisanship, in my opinion.
There is it. And one of the reasons why those meatpacking plants and others are using the cheap labor is because it's cheap labor and they don't have to pay a living wage. Well, if you have these workers that aren't making a living wage, guess what? They're going to need more taxpayer-funded government services. So, yeah, maybe it's inflationary by hiring American workers and raising the wages in those particular jobs, but you're going to pay it in your taxes to support these cheap workers, or you're going to pay it at the grocery store. So
interesting.
You don't know. It's all coming from the same place.
The line I hear used a lot that I love is the United States is a country, not an economic zone.
Right. It's not a spreadsheet.
If our entire goal is to make the green line go up, it's just GDP and nothing else. I mean, that's a goal, I guess. If we annexed Mexico tomorrow, our GDP would go up, but don't be any wealthier.
Right.
What people care about is their per capita GDP, the piece that they have. That's what we should be pushing for. We need to be getting people their jobs in the chicken processing plant so they could be happy, processing those chickens.
Right. You can supervise and manage.
Well, it's a respectful job. I mean, the thing about it is we started off about STEM, right? And that's great. But the truth of the matter is that not every person is going to go to college. Not every person wants to be a coder, right? And we need to build an economic system where it's like, if you want to be a butcher, if you want to be a farmer, if you want to be a truck driver, those are things that Americans can do, and they're respectful jobs, right? To provide for a family. And unfortunately, go ahead.
I grew up on dirty jobs. I love that.
There you go,
bro.
Yes.
And I think that it shaped how I viewed everything. These are guys that are working in some of the actual toughest jobs in the world. And guess what? They're getting paid really well for it because it's such a bad job. These guys it's a terrible situation, but Mike has been saying recently we gave some speech on specifically this topic. Well, I guess he doesn't really touch immigration, but he touches, hard work. So we told our kids to learn to code.
Yep.
And then it turns out we had AI that could code for them. We coded AI to code. It's like, what do we still need? HVAC technicians, plumbers, people that actually get their hands dirty and have to do this work. And that's dignified work. We should encourage that. People should be paid well and earn a good living for it.
Absolutely. And then if AI isn't taking that job, we have H1B visas to cover down on the rest. So that's very hopeful.
Kyle always knows how to tie it all together like that, Well, along those lines, one of the things you talked about, and I really liked, is, that would you say we're a country, not a economic zone? Like, I think that's, one of the things that we talk about on this podcast a lot, or A Better Dallas talks about a lot, is the fact that, there is a sense of shared morality, shared culture, shared values that are at the core of being a prosperous American. It's not just a matter of the dollars and the cents and how much money you're making, but there's more to your life than just that. And we used to have businesses that were sort of aligned that way. There was a sense of that pride in employing Americans, or that business ethic where you're not just trying to race to the bottom on salaries, that we've kind of lost a little bit. Along those lines, we also talk about different ways that immigration policy affects our country, and one of them are our elections. I know this is something that you all have been very active on, the whole idea that, we're importing illegal immigrants and putting in places or giving them legal status, and it affecting who gets to vote, and it affects the census and where congressional seats are. So I understand y'all were recently involved in a, Only Citizens Vote bus tour. Did I get that right?
That is, yeah.
Chris, would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about what that was and what you guys accomplished, what you're advocating for?
Sure. Well, IAP was one of the founding members of the Only Citizens Vote coalition, and then Tea Party Patriots, which was also one of the founding members of that coalition, put together this bus tour across the country. But essentially, the Only Citizens Vote coalition is an effort that advocates to ensure that only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections. I mean, it's pretty common sense. It's not even a 60-40 issue. It's almost a 90-10 issue. I think Tea Party Patriots' most recent polling on this found that 87% of Americans, including a vast majority of Democrats, support only U.S. citizens voting in U.S. elections. I think most people understand that if you went and visited Mexico for a long weekend, you wouldn't be allowed to vote in their presidential election if there just happened to be one. And it is technically illegal for a non-citizen to vote in our elections here, but it doesn't mean that it's enforced. So there are many, many ways that non-citizens can end up on the voter rolls. And that's what this coalition was set out to accomplish, was to try to find the solution to doing this. And there's a piece of legislation called the SAVE Act that's been introduced by Texas Congressman Chip Roy in the House of Representatives and Senator Mike Lee out of Utah. And essentially what the SAVE Act would do is require proof of U.S. citizenship at time of registering to vote. Seems like it's a pretty simple process, but back in the mid-90s, we passed this motor voter law, which simply means that anytime somebody goes to the DMV to get a driver's license, a new driver's license, they are automatically registered to vote, or at least given the opportunity to register to vote in the state that they're obtaining that driver's license from. There is a checkbox on that form, but that's all it is. It's just a checkbox. And what they found going back is that in a lot of these states, that box was checked by default. And anybody can get a driver's license. Almost anybody can get a driver's license. Driver's licenses are not reserved just for U.S. citizens.
Right.
They're for non-citizens too. And in 19 different states, plus the District of Columbia, you have laws that allow illegal aliens to obtain a driver's license as well. So every single time one of these individuals who's not a U.S. citizen interacts with a DMV and gets driver's license, they have the opportunity to vote. Now, it should be the secretaries of state or whoever happens to be running elections in the states should be purging the non-citizens from their voter rolls, but that's not often done, and that is something that we have seen. So that's what the SAVE Act would do, is not only require proof of U.S. citizenship. So instead of simply checking a box, you actually have to show a U.S. passport, a U.S.-based birth certificate showing that you are demonstrating that you are actually a U.S. citizen in order to register to vote. But it would also require the states to come up with a plan to remove non-citizens from their voter rolls. And then we would still need to rely on the federal government to still not only provide the resources to those states so they can easily remove the non-citizens, have a system that they can access where they can remove those non-citizens from their voter rolls, but also ensure that the states are actually doing what they say that they're doing. So it's sort of a comprehensive plan, but again, it's an issue. 87-13 is the split on it. Tea Party Patriots ran this bus tour. We started out in Anaheim, California. It took us about 3.5 weeks to travel across the country. I took it from Anaheim to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, hopped off just because of the timing of it. And then Rosemary Jinks, who's our director of policy, hopped on it for a couple days. And then Grant also joined them in Washington, D.C. And were you at the Annapolis stop too?
Nope.
In Annapolis, Maryland. So Grant was there though for the DC stop at the very end. But it was
all the way to walking distance from my office.
It was a great opportunity to not only help get our name out, but also to talk about the issue. And when you're riding in a bus down the interstate with basically a board citizens from your honorable.
Well, I mean, Chris, I'll say that you were there for the important part of the trip, which was through Texas.
That's right. I was.
But one thing that I'll go in.
Great stop in San Antonio, by the way. And then I went home for a day for the Corpus Christi stop, so I missed that one. But I know that one was also successful.
We love the whole state of Texas, but you didn't miss a whole lot in Corpus Christi. Yeah. We're also approaching basketball season, so I am, as a Dallas Mavericks fan, constitutionally prohibited from saying anything good about San Antonio. Too many.
From West Texas.
Yeah.
He's also a guy on SAVE Act, one of the leads.
Well, one of the things I wanted to kind of add some, like boots on the ground sort of stuff, what you're saying. Kyle and I are both, deputy voter registrars here in Dallas County. This is something that the very first event that A Better Dallas ever did was a deputy registrar training event. So this is something that we've always been very big. Let's train people to register voters, and let's get out and register voters. But one of the things that we are taught is, yes, when they're filling out the form, whatever they say, you put on the form, right? You are not allowed to ask them any questions. You are not allowed to ask, not just that they're not required to provide it, but we are prohibited from asking for some of that information when we're registering people to vote, which I think when people go through that training is quite eye-opening, especially because, in places like Dallas County that are very liberal, we'll just say that the voter rolls aren't always scrubbed particularly carefully or at all. I mean, this last presidential election cycle, there was a big controversy about the fact that the state of Texas was trying to go through and clear out dead people off the voter rolls. Yes. Comparing DMV information and other sources of information to remove dead people from the voter rolls got just an outraged response from Democrats and your, usual suspects, activist groups, to where they were opposing even doing that. I can't imagine how apocalyptic they would get if you were wanting to remove, non-citizens.
Yeah,
it's bad enough that every single major amnesty bill that's been proposed, every single one has a similar provision in it. There are inadmissibility provisions in immigration law. And if you're inadmissible for one of those things, you don't get to be here. And so they have to waive some of those inadmissibility provisions in order for you to get the amnesty. One of the things that makes you inadmissible in this country is unlawful voting. And so in every single one of these bills specifically, they allow for waivers for unlawful voting.
I don't think I ever heard anyone say that.
Oh my God.
Including
I did not know that.
The Dignity Act, which has has 22 sponsors, including 11 Republicans. It is a bill that exists now that allows for waivers for unlawful voting, which we are told doesn't exist,
Right.
but is important enough to waive it every single major amnesty.
So it's kind of like an indirect omission of, hey, we know this is happening. We don't want it to come back to bite any of our constituents.
It's funny, during the Lake and Riley Act, part of the reason why that bill got through in the Senate stronger than the House did is because the Senate was proposing amendments. It had mandatory detention for certain crimes. And so senators just kept adding things to it. How about assaulting a police officer? And that's a tough vote for Democrats. They vote for it if it comes on. They had all these amendments lined up, and the Democrats were holding it up. And finally, one genius senator said, how about mandatory detention for unlawful voting? And the Democrats said, you know what, I think we're done with this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of stuff that I think more people need to know is out there. Because to your point, that's what we always hear, right? We always hear, oh, there's no need to do any election integrity stuff. None of it's happening. This is all a fiction. You're making that up in your mind. What is this? Only citizens vote? Of course, only citizens vote.
Right.
But then the moment there are consequences for those that would not be lawfully voting, well, we can't have that. That would be discriminatory or whatever.
Jack in the Box will. And it's so obvious, too, because, I mean, we talked about the ICE raids and all these facilities. These people are using fake identities to get these jobs. They walk into HR with a social security number that's linked to someone. In most cases, they use fake names and every year they either change their identity. My opinion, I think a lot of the HR departments here are involved in this, knowing that this is the same person, but different name now, this next year or whatever. And so they're willing to do that for a job, right? Do you think that they're willing to do that to vote to possibly gain some kind of what they would feel a political advantage of possibly getting citizenship in the future? I would say yes. I mean, I would say that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and I don't even think they necessarily need the fraudulent documents because, again, the non-citizens who are here legally, in all likelihood, are going to have the documents that can be used to complete the voter registration form.
Yes.
And as I said, illegal aliens, for the most part, can just simply get those documents legally as well, because you have 19 states plus the District of Columbia that will give them a driver's license. And through the Biden parole programs, they were all able to also get social security numbers. And with their driver's license and social security number, they were able to successfully fill out that form. Now, you mentioned the voter registration form, and you weren't allowed to ask questions. They check that box and they're signing the bottom under perjury of law. But Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, there's never been one federal prosecution for somebody, a non-citizen, actually checking that box and signing that form. Is that correct? Or very few?
Yeah, there are people who have been arrested and charged for unlawfully voting, but in terms of just checking the box. And it gets more confusing because there's some states and localities that allow illegal aliens even to vote in local elections. So they need to know the difference.
So that was
DC. It came up in DC. The council passed this resolution, and even DC's mayor said, I can't sign this. And the council passed it over anyway.
That's bad.
What was pointed out repeatedly is, so DC is filled with embassies. So foreign, like, government officials,
Right,
who are now lawfully allowed to vote in DC election. It's just unbelievable.
well, we see.
Now, interestingly, it's the opposite in Arizona. Arizona has actually passed a law requiring proof of citizenship in order to vote in their state elections. But when they tried to do it for the federal elections, just in Arizona, the court said, no, you can't do it for the federal elections. So there's actually a two-pronged process in Arizona where you need to actually show proof of citizenship in order to vote in a state election, but you don't need to show the same proof to vote in a federal election.
I'd like to see who's funding those judges. So that rhymes with George Soros.
Well, I mean, you're seeing not only like local elections saying, oh, anybody can vote, right? Non-citizens, everyone can vote, illegal immigrants can vote. But you also have some of these places that are changing their charters to allow them to serve on the council or to serve in. I mean, we saw a proposal in Dallas that would have allowed non-citizens to serve on, different committees and boards, and not on the city council, but like on everything the city council can appoint people to. So it's not like this isn't happening and isn't something that it might be only 13% of the population, but they all must be on city councils because that's who's really pushing this crap right now.
Yeah, they're even taking our volunteer jobs. Like, dude.
Oh, you're a meme, Kyle. So I wanted to move from that, to we usually have a part of this show that is Kyle's current events. And fortunately today, with immigration experts on the line, President Trump got in front of the UN and talked about immigration. So his comments had to do with the problems that the UN causes in illegal immigration in Western countries, I think is how he generally described it. But I'd be really interested in your thoughts on what role the UN has played in promoting illegal immigration or open borders that we have to deal with here in the U.S.
Yeah, let me read the quote. The entire globalist concept of asking successful industrialized nations to inflict pain on themselves and radically disrupt their entire societies must be rejected completely and totally.
So ChatGPT definitely wrote that for him. That doesn't. I know Trump has the best words, but those aren't usually the words that he chooses. But how would you respond to sort of what he's talking about there?
Well, there were allegations that we've seen a lot of this going on during the border surge of UN-funded agencies, NGO kind of types that were in Central America that were effectively guiding folks north. So we know that was going on. It was enough to get several members of Congress to introduce bills to cut off UN funding and redirect it to border security for exactly that reason. That's part of it. The other part is that the UN, the way our system works now, is the UN picks our refugees for us. We don't select them, the UN selects them for us. And so we've got a system, a refugee system, where rather than prioritize helping people where they are, say in the Middle East, where a lot of folks are coming and going into Europe right now, we instead have the UN select them for us, fly them halfway across the world, plunk them in the US, and say, good luck. Here's some money to help you out. Now, the amount of money we spent to fly you here could have been used to help, 12 to 15 people in your nearby in a safe zone, but this is all kind of UN directed. They're sort of behind that, and I think that's what's going on in Europe. It seems like it's part of the problem there.
How did we get there to where the UN is the one getting to make these choices on who our refugees are?
I think it's just an international treaty that we're behind. One thing that we need, for example, is a safe third country agreements or understanding where if people want to apply for asylum, they have to apply for asylum in the first safe country that they get to. If you're being persecuted in a specific country, you're not going to be persecuted in the next country over. Instead, we have asylum shoppers that just keep going until they get to the best country, and that's when things get overwhelmed because one country, especially wealthy countries, end up with a lot of people who have a lot of needs, and I mean that fueled our border surge.
The people made it all the way from Nepal here, which blows my mind because I can't afford to go to Nepal. So how did they get here? That's like what really irks me. I find out people coming from mid-Africa and, like I said, like Central Asia and whatnot. I'm like, well, because everyone thinks, oh, everyone's from Mexico or Central America, but it's like, that's just simply not true. People are taking flights into northern Mexico, getting off the plane, hooking up with the cartel, getting smuggled across the border when it was open. These, in my opinion, if you have the money and ability to do that, how bad are you off really? Were you really...
We were told for 4 years that everything was out of our control, that what was going on is a crisis in all of the countries and all over the world, and that was the only thing driving asylum. And the second President Trump took office, it stopped cold. And so either everything in the world changed, or the reality of the situation is that people recognized the loophole and were rational. They looked at it and said, hey, this is an easy way for me to get in and stay in a better country. And so people took it. And when people got the understanding that this was not going to work, they stopped. But the truth of what you're saying about the cost, this is a major problem with immigration overall. Is we don't generally take the poorest of the poor. We take our middle class people, the agents of change from their countries, people that may have had the wherewithal to stay and make a difference. It's easier just to leave. The people that are truly poor are stuck there,
right,
with no one to help them, because the entire middle class emptied out and went to the USA. That's not how you build a third world country. That's not how you help ours. It's bad all around.
It's kind of like we're stuck now in a situation that if the country's wealthy, it's going to stay wealthy, and if it's poor, it's going to stay poor because, like you just said, none of the men want to stay and build a better country. There's none of that. Like, nope, pack up, leave immediately. And so that's just a really discouraging thing, because ultimately we would like to see a more prosperous world. And a lot of these countries do have massive amounts of mineral resources, and if they would invest in themselves and follow law and order, they could have a very prosperous country, but they choose not to.
Look at El Salvador. President Bukele recognized this years ago. He said, we can't have a country that's dependent upon people going to the U.S. and sending us money. We actually have to build our own country. And they're doing really well.
Right.
Very well.
Completely redoing their system. And that's what you want to see. A good country that's thriving, that can be part of the world economy.
Right. So everyone that's really worried about Trump and going around and locking up all the criminals is a great example just south of us. That's like, hey, that's actually going to be pretty good if we would follow through with it.
So there's I'll call it an immigration movie that I watched as a young man that shaped the way that I've always looked at illegal immigration. And it's a great movie, and it's called The Cowboy Way. It's starring Kiefer Sutherland and Woody Harrelson. And Grant, I see that you're perplexed, as well you should be, because the basic plot of this movie is that the friend of these two cowboys from New Mexico, his daughter is illegally smuggled into the U.S. by some unsavory types, and he is basically, forced to give everything that he has and travel across the country and get into some trouble out there that these two cowboys have to go rescue him on. But the base of the movie is the fact that we have these illegal immigration types of issues where people are smuggled into the country. I grew up down in southern New Mexico on the border, where illegal immigration is smuggling. It's coyotes bringing people across the border. You can go and find the little drop-off depots full of used shoes and used clothes, where they quickly change to put them and send them wherever they're going to. I say all that not only to encourage you to watch the movie The Cowboy Way, but also to ask, how do we get people to start seeing illegal immigration for what it largely is, which is human trafficking and human smuggling?
I in the previous 4 years helped a little bit with that. I think it opened some folks' eyes, and they started to realize, this is all being run by the cartels. Like, these people aren't making their way from Nepal all on their own. Like, they're having help here. Who's helping them here? So I think that helped. But again, I think the biggest challenge that we have when it comes to illegal immigration is, I think if you went around and you asked most Americans right now, they would tell you the problem's solved. It's done. It's not an issue anymore.
And that's so off.
So, and unless it's, us as Americans, unless it's right there in front of us at all times, no, the problem's still there. It's just, it's sort of a sleeper cell right now. It's waiting for its opportunity to become active again. We haven't stopped it. We haven't fixed it. It still exists. And that's what we're trying to do, is try to remind people that, no, these problems are still out there. They're just, and we haven't fixed them. We've just temporarily hit a pause button on them.
I'd say for folks to go out and find the New York Times did several articles during the Biden administration on the kids that were lost. That, in some cases we think that they ended up in sex trafficking. In some cases, specifically the New York Times, it was about labor trafficking. They're finding kids missing limbs working in roofing, and that's a real thing. And I also say, check out DHS's website. Every day, they are posting the worst of the worst, is what they call all of their releases. The kinds of criminals that they're arresting that were convicted usually in a state and released by a sanctuary jurisdiction, only to be picked up by ICE later. These are some pretty heinous criminals that had no business being in this country, that need to get out. It's a daily grind of, 10, 15 of the just worst people you could ever imagine being picked up and removed, and it's not ending. So pay attention to that. There's a criminal element, there's a trafficking element, there's a smuggling element. It's all tied.
Well, and that's why I appreciate the work that y'all were doing. I was so happy that you all agreed to come on a better conversation to talk with us about it, but also to share this information with our audience. A lot of people are very interested in immigration policy. Obviously, it's something that President Trump sort of elevated in 2016 and has kind of kept, top of mind, I guess, maybe until he did too good of a job on the southern border. But we really appreciate the work that y'all are doing. Again, I want to encourage our audience, the Immigration Accountability Project, iaproject.org. Go check out their website, look at the resources that they have. A couple of reminders. We need the Secure the Border Act. We need that to be HR 2, and we need it to get passed. We also need to make sure that we have the SAVE Act. That's promoted so that we can protect our elections, make sure that only citizens are voting. Chris, Grant, I appreciate y'all taking the time with us to educate us. Kyle, are is this scratched your immigration itch?
For today, yes.
Okay.
We're always here for you guys.
Perfect.
Well, gentlemen, do you all have any closing thoughts? Any last words you want to leave with our audience?
I wish we were back in Dallas. That was nice.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to letting us come on and talk about us and talk to your audience and thank you for the support on these issues that we've dedicated most of our adult life to. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Chris Chmielenski, Grant Newman, thank you for joining a better conversation. Thanks for the work the Immigration Accountability Project is doing. And to our audience, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.